Four people were shot and killed inside a small furniture store in Winona, Mississippi. It was the kind of crime that doesn't belong in a town like this. Quiet streets. Familiar faces. Very little violent history. The pressure to solve it was immediate. And within hours, police believed they had their answer. A former employee. Someone already known to them. His name was Curtis Flowers. What no one could have predicted was this. Over the next 20 years, the legal system would try to confirm that first decision 6 separate times. Not 6 suspects. Not 6 theories. One man. And this case would never stop asking whether the first answer had been the right one. Curtis Flowers had worked at the store years earlier. That single detail became the foundation of the investigation. There was no DNA tying him to the crime scene. No fingerprints. No murder weapon. But suspicion doesn't require proof to survive. It only needs momentum. Once investigators believed they had their suspect, everything else began to shift around that belief. Neutral details took on meaning. Ordinary facts became confirmation. This is the moment many wrongful convictions share. When an investigation stops asking who committed the crime and starts asking how to prove the answer it already has. The first trial ended with a conviction and a death sentence. For many cases, that would have been the end. For this one, it was only the beginning. The Mississippi Supreme Court overturned the conviction, citing serious prosecutorial misconduct. The trial had crossed lines that should never be crossed. But instead of stopping, the case reset. Curtis Flowers was tried again. And again. Each time the verdict collapsed, the system returned to the same conclusion. As if repetition itself could turn uncertainty into truth. Curtis Flowers was tried 6 times for the same crime. 6 juries. 6 verdicts. 6 attempts to reach the same result. Each trial exposed a flaw. Improper jury selection. Questionable witness handling. Procedural violations. But instead of correcting course, the system pressed reset. At some point, the case stopped being about evidence. It became about persistence. How many times can a system retry a person before doubt becomes irrelevant? And when does persistence cross into obsession? Judges repeatedly warned prosecutors about racial bias in jury selection. Black jurors were struck again and again. Courts ruled the practice unconstitutional. And yet, it continued. Each new jury moved further away from representing the community. And closer to reinforcing a predetermined outcome. Jury selection is meant to protect fairness. In this case, it became a mechanism to preserve certainty. The courtroom filled with confidence. But the foundation underneath it quietly eroded. Witness testimony formed the backbone of the prosecution's case. But the stories didn't stay the same. Details shifted. Timelines changed. Statements evolved. Some witnesses later said they were pressured. Others admitted they were offered incentives. Each inconsistency was explained away. Each contradiction minimized. By now, doubt wasn't just inconvenient. It was dangerous to the narrative. Curtis Flowers spent more than 20 years in prison. Much of that time on death row. Appeals moved slowly. Years passed quietly. The punishment wasn't only confinement. It was uncertainty. Waiting while the legal system decided whether it could afford to admit a mistake. Or whether it would simply try again. Time itself became part of the sentence. In 2019, the United States Supreme Court intervened. It ruled that racial discrimination had infected the jury selection process. The conviction was overturned. Again. This time, the language was unmistakable. The flaws were undeniable. The case had reached the highest court in the country. And the system could no longer look away. In 2020, prosecutors dropped the charges against Curtis Flowers. There was no retrial. No announcement of error. After more than 20 years behind bars, he walked free. He was not declared innocent. There was no apology. No acknowledgement that the system had failed him. The case did not end with clarity. It ended with fatigue. The legal process simply stopped. Not because truth had been reached, but because persistence had finally run out. Curtis Flowers left prison carrying decades the system could not return. Released quietly, as if exhaustion, not justice, had brought the case to an end. 6 trials tried to force one answer. But certainty never arrived. Only repetition. Only persistence. Curtis Flowers lost decades of his life to a system that refused to reconsider its first decision. The case is closed. The courts have moved on. But the question remains. What happens when the system values being right, more than getting it right? Subscribe to the Doubtful Archive for more cases where certainty failed and doubt remains.